Just start from there. That's it.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Okay, good morning. Can I inform those in the public gallery that they can use mobile devices through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available on the gallery rules for anyone wanting to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. 3G and 4G should not be used, and no recording or photographs are to be taken. So if members are content, we can start to work our way through the agenda. The first item on the agenda is apologies. We already have an apology in from Nick Matheson. Are members aware of any other apologies? Okay. So, declaration of members' interests. I have to remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant finance or other interests before taking part in relevant committee proceedings. So, does any member have any interest to declare at this stage? No, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda then is the draft minutes from the 5th of June 24, and refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of June 24, which are at page 6 of your meeting pack. Are members content with the draft minutes?
Content.
Thank you. I will accordingly sign them. Thank you. Okay. Matters arising. There is a letter from the Department of Finance in the tabled pack, page 3. So last Friday, 11th October 24, the Department of Finance wrote to all departments requesting their October monitoring returns, giving a deadline of Friday, the 25th of October 24. So, and just remind members that this committee has no formal role in agreeing monitoring round submissions in relation to the three bodies. That's the Northern Ireland Audit Office, Northern Ireland Public Services Ombudsman, and the Northern Ireland Assembly Commission. However, it does have a role in examining their financial performance over the budget year. May I suggest the committee writes to the Department of Finance as well as the three bodies, seeking further information on any submission to be made under the October monitoring process, which the committee can then consider at its meeting in November. Are members content that we write to the Department of Finance and the other three bodies? Content?
Content.
Thank you, members. So the next item of business, item 5 on the agenda, is the RAISE briefing regarding committee quorum. I would refer members to the committee's secretariat paper at page 10 of the table pack and the research briefing paper on page 12 of the meeting pack. And I would remind members that it was agreed at our meeting on the 5th of June to commission research on the makeup and quorum of equivalent audit committees in other jurisdictions. So I would like to welcome this morning Ray McCaffrey, who's an Assembly Research Officer, and I would invite Ray now to speak on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So members, the briefing paper itself is short, and I'll just cover the key points. So it was asked to look at quorum and membership requirements of equivalent committees in the House of Commons, Scottish Parliament and Welsh Parliament. And perhaps somewhat unsurprisingly, there wasn't a lot of published information and discussion available on this topic on which to base the research, and so where necessary I contacted officials in other legislatures directly for their input. Turning first to the House of Commons, the Public Accounts Commission was established under the National Audit Act 1983. The Commission consists of the member of the House of Commons, who is the chairman of the Committee of Public Accounts, the leader of the House of Commons, and 7 other members of the House of Commons appointed by the House, none of whom can be a Minister of the Crown. And unlike committees of the House of Commons, the Public Accounts Commission is a statutory body established under legislation and therefore may determine its own procedure However, it generally follows the practice of select committees. Its quorum is 3, and the research could not find any evidence that this has really been a topic for discussion in the past. Turning next to the Scottish Parliament, Scottish Commission for Public Audit was established under the Public Finance and Accountability Scotland Act 2000. The Commission consists of the member of the Parliament who is the convener or chairperson of the Public Audit Committee, and 4 other members of the Parliament appointed in accordance with standing orders. And officials from the Scottish Parliament advised the research that the Scottish Commission for Public Audit generally follows the same procedures that are set out for committees in the standing orders and has always done so, and this hasn't changed over time. So Rule 12.2.1 or Standing Order of the Scottish Parliament states, a committee shall not commence consideration of any business or vote if the number of committee members present, including the convener or deputy convener, if that person is in the chair, is fewer than 3. Finally, the Welsh Parliament, or the Senate, the Finance Committee currently comprises 4 members. Now, this has changed. Membership of the committee in the previous mandate was 7, and officials from the Senate advised that the reduction in numbers was due mainly to member capacity to fill spaces on committees. And this was set out in the Business Committee's report on 6th Senate committees, titles and remits, which was published in June 2021. And it stated that central to our deliberations on the committee system has been the goal of ensuring that no member of the Senate has to sit on more than 2 committees. This has informed our decisions on both the number of committees and their size. And information provided by Senate officials for the purposes of the research went on to say, the Business Committee's proposed model was based on the systems that operated in the 4th and 5th Parliaments, i.e. a number of combined policy and legislation committees operating alongside a number of typically smaller specialist committees to perform various standing order and statutory functions. The aim was to minimise the number of committees that members were required to sit on, whilst ensuring all standing order requirements were fulfilled. So this led to the Finance Committee, Legislation, Justice and Constitution Committee and Conduct Committee being allocated 4 members each. And again, just in relation to quorum requirements, Standing Order 1731 of the Welsh Parliament states that in relation to Senate committees, a committee meeting must be declared in quorum if there are fewer than 3 members or less than 1/3 of the committee's members, whichever is the greater, present. So members, that's just a quick run through of the key points of the quorum and membership requirements of equivalent committees. I'm happy to try and take any questions or look in greater detail at anything that members would like.
Okay, Ray, thank you very much for that report. So members, anybody have any questions for Ray on the topic?
Yep.
No?
No.
Okay. Ray, thanks very much for the research paper. It will certainly give the committee something to think about going forward, and we do appreciate the work that you've put into bringing that report to us this morning. So thank you very much.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, members.
So members, just like to seek comments from you really, whether you wish to take the issue of increasing the Audit Committee quorum forward by way of a consultation with all MLAs, the Speaker and the Committee on Procedures. Nick, maybe would you have anything to contribute?
Yes, thanks, Chair. So, as you will recall, in June, the committee asked for research on this matter. This is something that the previous committee raised in their legacy report. In the last year of the last mandate, Audit Committee found it quite difficult to get quorum, which, albeit is only 2 members, just with the pressure of legislation coming through, members found that they were otherwise occupied, with the majority of members also sitting on 1, if not 2, stat committees as well. And so off the back of that, the previous committee suggested that this committee looks at whether it would be worthwhile moving Audit Committee from 5 members, as it is now, up to all of the other committees in the Assembly, which is 9, which would mean that the quorum would go from 2 to 5. So it would just bring it in line. So the research really was to look at what the equivalent committees in other places do. And as Ray has outlined there this morning, there isn't another committee that has quorum that has membership the same as its other committees. They're all less than that, and in certainly 2 cases they are the same as us. They have a membership of 5 and a quorum of 2. So with that in mind, as the chair alluded there, would just be whether or not we want, as a committee, you would like to just park that there and leave things as they are, or whether you would like to move forward and perhaps gain the views of the members, the Speaker and Procedures Committee, because this, if we did want to go ahead and change the quorum, it would require a change in standing orders, obviously. So that's the decision that the committee really need to make today.
I think the unintended consequences of increasing the committee to 9 is that the quorum then increases to 5, and my personal feeling is that is, it's not going to ease the issue that we have at the moment. In fact, it may even may increase the pressure. But I'm open to members to. Dan, do you want to make a?
Thank you, Chair. Whenever you hear the research paper, and it seems like we're broadly in line with what others are doing, it's hard to justify a case to make us a lot bigger. And as the Chair said, then that has the additional consequence that it could be even more difficult to meet whenever your quorum is higher. But I would be happy, to refer it over to the standards and see if they have any opinion on how they feel the audit committee's doing in terms of effectiveness, or if they feel like there should be any sort of review. But I think when you hear that evidence, there's not a strong case for change here right now.
I'm broadly in agreement with what Diane has said there, and also in the bit Chair, that you alluded to there, that you could be exacerbating the problem in terms of trying to convene a meeting rather than meeting. But separate to all of that, the principles of how it's done, the research, and in terms of the principles of how it's done, the research paper shows we're not out of step with how it's been done elsewhere anyway. And that's my thoughts.
Ciara, did you want to come in on this one?
No, I suppose I just concur with all other members. I think the research paper makes it quite clear that we aren't out of step from elsewhere. It could exacerbate the issue if we're looking for more members, given the core issue is trying to get a quorum when the Assembly is really, really busy bringing legislation through. So I would be content that it's parked at this stage and we just monitor.
Okay, members. Well, the decision is: do we park it, or do we bring forward a draft consultation period, a paper that would be prepared for consideration at the next meeting? So, members, I'm open to what you feel about that.
Well, Ciara's suggestion that we maybe park it and see how we get on in this term of this assembly and how our attendance is able to be managed with the members that we have.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, we all happy then that we just park it in the meantime? Okay, members, thank you for that. We move then to the next item, which is the Northern Ireland Audit Office draft budget for 25-26, and refer members to the Secretariat paper on page 19 of the meeting pack, as well as a letter from the NIAO on page 22 of the main pack. A more detailed submission from the Audit Office is contained in the table pack at page 13. So let everyone get settled before we move on. Okay, you're very welcome to the meeting this morning. So I just invite the officials to brief the committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to present to you today on our requested budget. I'm joined by colleagues Rodney Allen, Brian O'Neill and Anu Keane today. We have included in your pack a tabled paper. I'm going to pass to Rodney, who is our Chief Operating Officer, to take you through the detail of that paper, and then we're happy to answer any questions or that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Drina. Good morning, Chairman, members. Mr. Chambers, I'm joined, as Drina says, by Brian, who you know from previous occasions is our Director of Corporate Services, and Anu, who heads up our Manager, Head of Corporate Services.
You're all very welcome.
Thank you very much. Very conscious, Chairman, that I wrote to you on the 7th of October with what was a high-level estimate of our anticipated budgetary needs for 25-26, and subsequently the clerk quite rightly asked us to provide more detail. So we prepared that detail, Chairman, but unfortunately with the tight time window, you only received it yesterday afternoon and may not have had the opportunity to look at it in a great amount of detail. So if you're content, I would like to take a few minutes just to very quickly talk through that particular paper. Thank you. Page 2, members, we have drawn attention in paragraph 3 to the fact that we have a new corporate plan, and we've highlighted for you there our 3 key corporate priorities over the period of 2024 to 29. So that'll set some of the context on why we're in front of you talking about our budgetary needs for next year to support us in the delivery of that plan. I'll not repeat the detail of it. We did put a copy of the plan in the pack as well, along with a copy of our annual business plan for the current year to provide you again with a little bit more detail. Figure 1 on page 3 is simply a repeat of the table that we set out in the correspondence that I wrote on the 7th of October. Just a wee bit of context below that. What do we do with our resources that are allocated to us? More as a reminder to members, because we've been with you before, but our staff costs take up about 70% of our budget. 13% of the remaining costs goes to our what we call the contracted out, so private sector firms who have procurement arrangements with us and undertake a lot of our financial audit business on our behalf. Of the balance, around about 15% is the overheads, the central running costs of the office, so that leaves us just with about 2% on non-cash, which is sort of depreciation for running the organisation. Just overleaf on page 4. So in turn then, how we actually allocate the resources for the office. So 65% it goes on financial audit, and it's sometimes the bit of the business, even though it's the biggest bit, that sits a wee bit more below the radar, because it's all of that regulatory work that is done on an annual basis when we undertake the audits of around about 150 public bodies, and Darina expresses the opinions on those accounts every single year. So that represents about 65% of our business. About 25% of it goes on what we call public reporting. So in my old language, that's VFM. That's our value for money reports, essentially. That's our work that in the main is going to service the Public Accounts Committee. And the remainder of how we allocate the resources is, you'll see, about 7% goes in overall good governance and anti-fraud within the organisation, and how we interface with all of the relevant stakeholders in our audited bodies, with our remaining very small slice for support to wider stakeholders, including at times handling specific MLA inquiries that would come to us. So in terms of today, kind of circling round to the meat of it and why we have come to you asking for a 6.4% increase in our budget for next year. So figure 4 sets that out in a bit of detail and breaks it down. So you'll see that our income costs are falling by £200,000. We've provided a wee bit of narrative just below each of these. So we're NFI, the National Fraud Initiative, is a biennial thing for us, so we won't have the income from it in the 25-26 year the way we would have in 24-25. Likewise, the costs drop off, so it's an in and out. So you'll see decreases in both income and in other expenditure associated to that, and some other small increases in decreases in income because there's some work that we're not doing any longer on behalf of the National Audit Office on European agricultural funds and also the lottery accounts. Staff costs, members, we have a fairly intensive programme of training our own trainee accountants and apprentices, and we want to continue with that, and indeed we anticipate increasing our intake of trainees in the year ahead. Our requested staff base and the funded staff base that you've provided of over 130 FTEs, we really consider that absolutely crucial in meeting the expectations of this Assembly and what it expects of us in the year 25-26. Now, it should be stressed that we are operating in a very difficult recruitment market. I've talked to the committee about that in the past. It continues to be difficult, so we are in a situation where we do have vacant posts, even to fill in the current year, before we can staff up fully in the next year. However, our forecast does take account of that, and of course it takes account of a cost of living increase subject to negotiation with trade unions. Then, members, on our contracted out costs, you'll see a movement there from 1.6 million through to 1.8 billion. That is solely the additional contracted costs year on year that we have with the private sector firms from whenever we went out to open procurement for all of that work. And then our GAE, our general admin expenditure, we've got some reductions there associated to the NFI and a little bit of added increases on the, again, inflationary costs that we incur, and a very small capital request of £40,000 to support our IT capital equipment and some of our other overheads in running the business. So really, we've put a wee bit into, members, opportunities in 25, 26 and beyond. Paragraph 12 there, we've drawn your attention to a strategic review of the way in which we actually deliver our financial audits in terms of the volume of work that is undertaken by those contractors that I have referred to in the private sector. That's quite significant, and it's early at this stage, but it may generate the potential to further increase our FTE staff base alongside delivering efficiencies and indeed enhancing quality of our work. Paragraph 13, we've talked before about a really strong focus for our organisation on quality and innovation. So we believe that there are still areas that we can tap into, including artificial intelligence, to really support and enhance and indeed deliver efficiencies in how we go about our business. That investment is very, very important for us to keep us relevant. And of course, in paragraph 14, you are aware, and I alluded to it earlier, of the fairly extensive engagement we have with the Public Accounts Committee on a weekly basis, but we are at the preliminary stage of engaging with other Assembly committees, and you have provided us funding for that, and that's an area that we anticipate will grow quite significantly in the period ahead. So in summary, Chairman and members, we're asking for your support for the net increase of 6.4%. We believe that would enable us to provide the Assembly with the professional independent public audit function that you anticipate, and to meet your needs in 12 months ahead and deliver proper scrutiny of public finances across both central and local government public services. There is one small caveat. We've been talking about this in-house. We haven't built this into the paper in any form or fashion, but everybody's aware that the Labour government is going to make its first budgetary announcements in a couple of weeks. We haven't factored in any possibilities into that. There's some discussion around potential employers' increased national insurance contributions, for instance, but we haven't put that into the calculations that are in front of you. So finally, Chairman, and thank you for giving me so much time. We are very appreciative of the support that this committee has given us to date and in the current year, and it's been absolutely critical in helping us deliver the vision that we're striving for. And thank you, and if there are questions, we'll happily try and answer them.
Thank you very much for that, and we do appreciate the work that you do carry out on behalf of the public. Can I just ask, maybe, what difference would your proposals for the budget for next year that you've outlined today have on the services that you can provide to the public?
Take that, Chairman. Others may wish to come in behind me. Without this budget, I mean, the services to the public essentially are services, first and foremost, to this committee and this organisation at the Assembly. Without this budget, we will not deliver the accountability that you would expect. This will enable us to come forward on a very regular basis to PAC. It will also enable us to service the other committees. So we have other committees who are very keen to look at the reports that PAC are not taking. That gives us the best opportunity to make it an outcome in the way that we would want and in the way that we would make best impact, I suppose, in the public domain. A budget less than this would mean that we would have to cut our cloth in different places. So for instance, I suppose that would mean that I would have to say to Dorina, Auditor General, we probably have to do less VFM work and less performance auditing, because we have our financial audit portfolio that must be serviced. That's 65% of the business, where she must give opinions on an annual basis. So I think, it's an interesting question you've thrown at me, but I think without this budget, the impact of the Northern Ireland Audit Office would be significantly diluted.
Right, okay. So, but what impact do you think your new engagement strategy with Assembly committees will have on the levels of work that you have?
Yeah, so obviously when we came in front of you asking for our 24-25 budget, we had anticipated with the return of the Assembly that we would be called upon to service other committees. You'll appreciate that pre-summer recess our focus was very much on the Public Accounts Committee being the primary committee that we support, on supporting them in the early days of their work, supporting their inquiries. We then did, over the summer period, we produced departmental guides, one for each of the departments, and we issued those to the chairpersons of each of the statutory committees just in the first week of September there. So these guides are a landscape overview from our perspective, and importantly they then contain any reports which the Public Accounts Committee have released. So any reports where the Public Accounts Committee have determined that they do not wish to hold an inquiry within that committee structure. So that it's quite recent, but that allows our departmental committees now to consider whether they want to take forward any work on the basis of those reports. Just 2 weeks ago, Kyle, our Assembly Liaison Officer, then met with each of the clerks to the committees to explain our work, to really reinforce our willingness to engage with the committees. And just last week, myself and Kyle had a really useful meeting with one of the senior clerks where we have agreed a process whereby we all respect the primacy of the Public Accounts Committee and ensure that our work still continues to service that committee as it should, but allows us to work with other departmental committees as well. It was a really useful meeting. We have had some early written engagement with some of the committees. We are really, really keen to support, and we do think from early engagement with clerks in particular, there's an appetite for the committees to engage with us. So something that we want to do, something that we think would enhance our work, something that we think would enhance public accountability as well, but it is in the very early stages. I do think it will probably intensify over the next few months. And something.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'll bring members in now. John, you were first.
Yeah, sure, thank you, and thanks all of you for being here and for the detail in the report as well. I note the 6.4% increase overall, and totally understand, of course, the staff increases, yearly increases with salaries and those matters. The question, though, that I have, and it might be partly answered at point 12, which you have already alluded to, the contracted out costs increase is over 10%. So it's out of kilter with the 6.4% increase. Is that something that needs further examination, or is there already in place a review process to keep checks on that during financial years as well as preparing for financial years?
I take that, Chairman. Thank you. So the contracts that we have with the private sector firms are generally on a 3-year commitment with a rolling 1+1 optional after the initial 3 years. So what you see in front of you are the commitments that we have to make payments under the contracts that we've entered into with them, and they are all subject to annual increases in line with CPI. And then there's a staggering approach. They're not all on the same timeline. So we have some that have been in place maybe and are already on optional years, and some that are just in year 2 because they were only procured 2 years ago. So it's a committed figure which we cannot extract ourselves. Indeed, if we did try to extract ourselves from, I suspect we'd end up in litigation with the private sector firms. However, you flagged up paragraph 12. It has, along with sister audit agencies in other regions, it has got us thinking very strategically about this position, because around about 25% of the financial audit business that we do is in contract with those private sector firms. And we do have to ask ourselves, is it the best use of the resources that you have given to us? For many, many years, that has been the traditional position. It was a way back a report that Lord Sharman produced quite some years ago that advocated this. But there is some fresh thinking now around it to say, the benefits that were foreseen at that stage, are they still realistic in today's environment? So we're doing a strategic piece at the minute just to look at whether or not this is the right way to continue to operate the business in the future. and we would obviously come back to the committee on that in due course, but we've prepared some internal papers. We're going to talk to our board about this. And then in the period ahead, depending on what the best options are, we may well come back to you and articulate the case. But essentially it would be converting that, crudely, that hard cash that's going out at the moment into more members of staff. And there's a tension around that in light of what I've been saying to you about where we are and the difficulties we're incurring in acquiring the staff that we actually need. But over the strategic period ahead, there may well be some scope here.
Okay. Thanks for that, and I'm assuming that the contracts that are awarded on a 3-year basis, there's a best value element to all of this to take it whenever they're tendered or advertised. Yeah.
Fully open procurement.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And we use the services of CPD to guide us through that.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, John. The next member to indicate was our Vice Chair. Diane, would you?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for being here today to discuss this. Looking at this and the increase application on the back of the increase that was approved for last year, I just wanted to ask you, where we're looking at the budget allocated for 24-25 and you talk about the ongoing staff vacancies, what's the 24-25 outturn likely to be?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Chairman. Used to work in our office, so you're very insightful with your questioning. Anticipated, that's a very good question, thank you, Diane. Anticipated this would come up. We're underspending, and at this stage, we, in our most recent submission, or certainly our August submission to the Department of Finance, we did indicate that we would be in excess of £600,000 of an underspend on our budget this year. So just last week, I was speaking to the clerk of the committee about this in recent days, we have received from the Department of Finance a request for October monitoring. So we will now look more closely at what we should surrender, because last year when we talked to the committee and you supported us in the way we did, I think we did flag at that time that it would probably be a bit ambitious for us to spend the full budget that you'd allocated to us because of the time lag. And I can, if you wish, I can give you a sense just on where we are in staffing FTE numbers that are heavily influencing that. But all roads are leading back to staffing. So we operate in that situation where it's the 65% of the business that is financial audit. It's driven by regulation and regulatory standards. And in so doing, we need to have the right people in the right place at the right time, and we need high quality people. And around about 85% of our organisation is qualified or part qualified accountants. So again, not curtail me if I'm going on, members, but to give you a sense of why we're ending up in this underspend situation, I wrote down the numbers earlier. We commenced the year for the funding that you've given us at around about 116 full-time equivalent members of staff back in April. We're gradually growing that. Last month we were up to 120. We've just run some more recruitment competitions. We've done 10 this year alone, 10 since April, trying to recruit the right people. So we're forecasting for December around about 125 FTEs. We need to grow more. You've funded us for 130 FTEs for the full year, and that's ideally where we want to be. So that's very much driving the underspend.
No, I appreciate that, because I'm just thinking, as we're looking at this, how we look if you're reporting an underspend and then we're approving potentially, a notable increase, in the current financial climate. So it's just important that we have that on record in terms of, we're approving the ideal staff situation and you're currently operating under pressure with staff vacancies there and continue to be. Just in terms of the income piece, and it's reducing because some types of work are coming to the end, is there any potential for any other income for the audit office for the work undertaken?
For work as much you want to pick up in the
I will. And Doreen, come on a couple of thoughts on the work side. Actually, the predecessor committee we gave a commitment to, because our income, our hard charging income is significant. It's not insignificant, but of course it's only an element of our business. So we have done, and Brian and team have done quite an extensive piece in this. But to generate more income would in the main require legislative change, so that we would obviously invoice some of those bodies that we only notionally charge at present. There are pros and cons of that, some of which the committee has looked at before, and a simple argument is that it's public money going around the circle. There's another alternative argument that you could say, well, we'll not do any invoicing and we'll just fully fund the audit office and we'll keep hard charging out of it. So that The short-term answer is there's no quick fix to generate more income on the audit side. Diane, what we can do, and we have a commitment again to do this for you, and we are doing it, we can generate a bit more income on our building. So if you recall, you supported us quite substantially to refurbish, and we've got a wonderful building. We're very proud of it, actually. But we also have part of the strategy was we've opened up some of that building for tenanted space. So we are hopefully in the days ahead signing our first lease with our first tenants. So we will start generating income from that. And we still have some areas left. And we're actively looking at the potential to bring in some more tenants and generate income from that, because that's very important, because if we maximise that out, it could be the equivalent of as much as 2 members of staff. That's what it would mean to us every single year. In so doing, we've taken a very conscious decision, and it leans a wee bit back into the question, and we're thinking about efficiencies in the business, we're thinking about underspends. We have a fantastic training facility which you have provided. I can't. In fact, we really should, Chairman, have you down someday if that's fine. We have an excellent facility. But what we've been doing is we've been opening that up to wider public sector use. And I have to say, direct, we haven't charged for it. So we actually generated efficiency, in my eyes, into the wider public sector, because we're offering that to many organisations to be coming in and availing of it. And a news team has been servicing that. And I think that's really important, because it's an indirect way of raising the revenue, but actually the audit office isn't benefiting, but the wider public sector is benefiting.
Absolutely, no, that's good to hear. It's good to see the tenants coming in and making the good use of the premises, good return on investment, capital spend. No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Diane. Ciara, the floor is yours, please.
Just like you, Rodney, and the team, for the presentation today and the report. Just one question, and it's obviously in relation to the vacancies, and obviously you have quite clearly set out, and it's good to see that it is on the increase. Is there any key challenges in relation to the recruitment, particularly when you are competing against the private sector? And so it'd be just useful to find that out, particularly given the increase that you hope to achieve by December, but likewise, there is 130 positions available. Is it a challenging environment that you're competing with?
Thank you, Ciara. I'll start, and others I'm doing a lot of talking, others may wish to come in. Thank you. Really important area, one that has tested all of us. Many challenges. Maybe contextually, maybe say first and foremost, we put great weight on growing our own. So that aspect of recruiting trainees, recruiting apprentices, I'm really proud of what we've been doing in the apprentices space. We have some excellent members of staff that are coming through those routes. And then we have other tremendous members of staff who've been with us a long time. Interestingly, because, and again, I've quite a lot of thoughts here, but the point you make on the private sector, we've actually lost some members of staff in recent years who have decided they want to take the opportunity to avail of maybe the private sector. Very interestingly and refreshingly, some of those people have subsequently came back to us on subsequent recruitment rounds. So we're placing great store in that too, because I suppose I have to be careful what I say in the public record, but the grass isn't necessarily greener when people explore the opportunity to work in some of these private sector experiences. So where we're getting that real pressure is the financial auditor, as we call it in our world. So those are our qualified members of staff. So that's really where we're competing against the private sector for people perhaps just out of their training contracts, or in fact people who have been accountants for a number of years and want to diversify. That continues to be a pressure point. We're running competitions quite frequently. We are, in the main, attracting new talent to come and join us, but it's relatively small numbers whenever we run those financial auditor competitions. What that has actually made us do, and it's a wee bit of a strategic change, but it's actually enriched the whole skills in the organisation, because we have introduced in the past 2 years then a grade that we're currently calling performance auditor, which is equivalent to that financial auditor. But it flexes the model a little bit, because we're bringing in skills such as people like investigative background, journalists, people with a legal background, and they're really working then very much in our VFM space, and they are enriching what we're offering as an organisation. Very good members of staff, and in fact we've offers out to a couple more in that space at the moment. In terms of the private sector, in terms of us making it attractive, we're very keen to get out there and, frankly, sell our brand as much as we possibly can. So we're doing quite extensive senior leadership engagement, careers fairs at universities, out speaking directly to universities, using social media quite a bit too, and how we sell ourselves, a space that, I've been around here for quite some time that we wouldn't really have entered into before, but we're doing a lot of that now. Not quite in the TikTok space, but maybe that'll come in due course. Very mindful of the T's and C's to make ourselves attractive against the private sector. We have an excellent hybrid working package. I emphasise hybrid working. It's not remote working, because we place a lot of store in the actual physicality and our teams being together. We are a training organisation and spending time together, and then being out again auditing our auditees and our client base. I like to think we have excellent public sector T's and C's. We often undersell the benefit of that public sector pension, which the private sector doesn't have. So we've been trying to articulate that in a very sophisticated package of benefits that we have worked up. And then with the support that the committee has given us, we have to be very careful in how we flex and keep attractiveness around our salaries, to be frank. We won't and don't do some of the things that the private sector can do with private money, which we don't do with public money, and we don't offer bonuses, for instance. But we do have to think, do we need to slightly extend salary scales, for instance, in the financial auditor grade to make ourselves a little bit more attractive? So all of that is in the mix. I'm sorry, that's probably a bit long-winded, but it maybe gives you a sense of what is a subject very close to our heart.
If I could maybe add through the chair, just this week we have recently appointed a new head of people in OD. That post has been vacant for most of the year due to the previous person leaving. But again, that'd be a great benefit to the organisation in terms of bringing new ideas on recruitment, and hopefully we'll see the impact of that in the coming months.
Thank you very much.
Chair,
Are you happy enough?
Yeah, thank you. Just one other thing. Could you just maybe around the apprenticeships, because I would very, very keen to promote apprenticeships, obviously within the civil service. So just, what's your thoughts on that and growing apprenticeship entry into the audit office?
Yeah, so if I can just come in, because we do, we actually, that's a space as well, Ciara, that we are very keen to grow, as Rodney said, grow on our own, both in the higher level apprentice and then in the sort of graduate trainee accountant. And we do have a pathway whereby our higher level apprentices then can move on to the degree and trainee accountant programme. A lot of that is again about getting our message out there, getting understood, and actually touching those individuals as early as we can in their school and their future career journeys. As Rodney said, we have been doing a lot of engagement with the universities, with Queen's, with UU in Belfast and in Magee, and then direct engagement with the FEC colleges as well. We have over the past 2 years been offering summer placements for students as well, to get them into the organisation, to understand what we're about, and work experience for young people as well, again to let them see what it's really like, to be an accountant. It's really, not that boring job that we sometimes but we've also been doing we've really been looking at what is a modern workforce and what that needs to look like. We have been very lucky with a lovely modern building for our staff, but we've been doing a lot of work, as Rodney said, our T's and C's are one thing, but really looking at what is our well-being offering and how we invest in our people, because there's two issues here at play. There's recruit and there's retention as well. And in some areas we can't compete with the private sector, but we've got a huge internal people focus, and we've introduced a people strategy, well-being strategies, learning and development strategies, and we're looking at equality and diversity. And these aren't just pieces of paper. There's groups and there's people really driving change in this area, making sure new leadership development courses for our own staff to really ensure that they're enriched in their roles as well. So all of that, a lot of our apprentices and our younger members of staff are really enthused about and really part of these initiatives as well. And what we do find with the apprentices is that when we are going out to the recruitment fairs, going out to conferences, we have a stand at the NICON conference there today, we're bringing those apprentices, those trainees out, because their enthusiasm and them speaking to people is much more effective than me doing it. Let's be honest, it really is. So it's really, they've been brilliant. You know, our experience to date has been fantastic, and it's definitely a growth area that we want to continue to invest in.
Very much so. And just very quickly to add to that, Kieran, I'm going to get a little bit personal here, but you're talking to someone who started their career at the tender age of 17 in the civil service. So I'm a great believer in people having different routes, and we respect that in the audit office. That was some 39 years ago. I hasten to add, you can work my age out now, that's maybe not necessarily good. But this year alone, so we've 8 trainees, 5 of them are from the graduate stream, so they're folks that have gone through university, and 3 of them are what we call the higher level apprentices. So they're effectively people straight out of school, you would think, but very interestingly, some are not quite that. They've gone and done other things, and they're maybe slightly older and joining us, and so it's excellent, and they've already got skills and life skills under their belt. So it's an interesting little mix. So there are 3 of them. It's a tremendous programme, and I think the way Dorina has articulated there in terms of the strength that we put into it alongside our overall people offering, it's really, really important. So to hark back to my earlier comments, we just need more.
Okay,
Well,
Kieran?
thank you.
Okay.
And it's delighted to hear the excellent work that you are doing and focusing internally within your team to retain your team, and then likewise giving those opportunities to your apprenticeships. So that's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. Members content? Okay. Okay, guys, thank you very much indeed for appearing this morning. It's been very helpful. And I would like to place on record our appreciation for the valuable work that you do on behalf of the public. So thank you, and wish you all well going forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All of you. Thank you.
Good morning. You're very welcome. Margaret Kelly, Ombudsman, Sean Martin, Acting Deputy Ombudsman, and Kirsty McCool, Head of Governance, representing the Northern Ireland Public Service Ombudsman, here this morning to present their draft budget for 25-26. Or sorry, 25-26, yeah. Typo. And can I inform members that Margaret and Sean met with the Vice Chair and myself a couple of weeks ago informally, just to have a provisional look at the budget and the challenges that they were facing in the incoming year. So, Margaret, the floor is yours.
Good morning, committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a bit about our work and our budget and to answer your questions. If committee don't mind, I'm going to take a few minutes just to give a bit of an overview of the work and some of the key issues. So, as committee will know, NIPSO's primary role is to make a difference to individual citizens in Northern Ireland by providing access to justice, which is free, independent and impartial. And we do that by independently investigating complaints from individual citizens and also undertaking systemic investigations. But we also aim to make a difference to public services and public bodies in Northern Ireland through promoting service improvement by learning from complaints. And committee will see from the paper, I'll not go through the whole range of functions that we have because they're there for committee to look at, and I know you're familiar with them, but I did just want to talk a little bit about what's been happening in our work. So individual complaints in relation to maladministration and failures in care and treatment in health and social services make up the vast majority of our work. In order to be proportionate, we use a 3-stage approach. So stage 1 is when we assess a complaint. Can we accept it? Does it fall within jurisdiction? Stage 2 is an 8 to 10 week investigation where we primarily seek to resolve a complaint. It costs a public body something like 40 times more to resolve a complaint at stage 3 than it does at stage 1. And the pressure on public finances mean we should all have a focus on trying to resolve complaints where we can. But if that is not possible and there are very serious complaints, then they will go through to a further stage of investigation, and that's stage 3, and that is usually around a 52-week investigation, and the number of stage 3 investigations has gone up. So overall, you will see that our complaints have increased really significantly, with just over 1,170 complaints last year, which is more than double since NIPSO was established in 2016, and an average 15% yearly increase. But in the year that we are currently in, that has continued apace. We're just at kind of the 7-month mark in the year, and we estimate that by the end of this year we will have dealt with approximately 1,250 to 1,300 complaints. And that does not include an additional 350 re-presented complaints. So that would be when someone comes to us and they haven't finished the complaint of the public body, and we say to them, well, actually under the legislation, go back, try to finish that, and if you're still unhappy, come back to us. So we're looking at something like 1,500 to 1,600 complaints across the course of this year. We have seen complaints increase in almost all areas of public services. Health complaints in the last 3 years have gone up by 14% overall. They've gone from 38% of our total to 43%. Education complaints have gone up by 15% over the last 3 years and now make up a total of 13% of the complaints that come to NIPSO. And I think quite worryingly, over the last 3 years, housing complaints have risen by 28%, which is a cause for concern. I often say in the office, NIPSO are the tip of the iceberg. To get to us, you have to have gone through the public body's complaint process, which can often be difficult and take determination, and then you have to begin the process to come to us. So when I see those kind of increases, I know that there are usually many issues underneath that I won't have seen, because it does take real effort to get through to the office. But it's not only a matter of a sustained increase in complaints. For me, I have also noted an increase in the complexity and the seriousness of cases that I am seeing at that stage 3. So when we undertake a stage 3 report and we do that investigation, we issue a draft to the public body and to the complainant to allow them to check for factual accuracy, to make sure we haven't missed anything. And when that comes back, I see every single one of those. So on average, they're probably running about 100 odd reports a year. And I've been enrolled for 4 years now. So I now have 4 years worth of looking at that level of reports every year. And in the last 12 months, the very serious cases that I have seen have really increased. And what I am seeing, particularly in health and social care cases, is an increase of more serious harm and an increase in the number of cases where we would say there had been preventable deaths or untimely deaths. And just to give you a sense of that, I am just going to reference a few of those cases that have come through the office in the last 12 months. So someone who had really significant and severe pain, who was left for over 9 hours without any pain relief, and who developed sepsis, and the failure to identify that in a timely manner led to the person's death. The intrauterine death of a baby at 34 weeks as a result of what I can only describe as acute failings in the care of the baby and that mother. It was a very high-risk pregnancy, and the risks were known. The failure to identify a cervical fracture and a misdiagnosis of that as a cardiology problem, which led to compression of a spinal cord and death by pneumonia, which again, a preventable death. And the committee may be aware of the recent coverage from Mr. Cull about his father's untimely death due to a bowel obstruction, and the fact that his father's premature discharge meant he died within 7 hours of being discharged from hospital. And also a very serious kidney injury, actually irreparable damage to the kidney of an adult with learning disability due to the fact that a renal stent had been put in, which should have been removed within 3 months, and certainly by the manufacturer's guidelines at an outside 6, and wasn't removed until 18 months after it had been put in, which led to calcification of the stent and really serious kidney damage, and actually links to some of the issues around the ongoing urology inquiry, even though it is out of the time period of that inquiry. Those are the kind of really serious cases that I have seen in the last 12 months that in my first 3 years as Ombudsman I may have seen once or twice in a year. So I am definitely seeing, and my team are seeing, an increase in the seriousness and the complexity, and that has many implications. It is really important for families that they have access to the Ombudsman's office when they have those kind of serious concerns. It's really important for families that we investigate those fairly and appropriately, and it's really important that the kind of recommendations we make give families some sense that we are working to try to prevent those happening again, because the majority of what complainants say to me is, I'm bringing this complaint so it won't happen to someone else. So in the case of the death of the baby, we have recommended an independent review of both the maternity and obstetric unit in that case, and that the findings of that review be reported to my office, because we do have a concern that that really shouldn't have been missed. There are other implications for the office. We use independent professional advisors when we investigate those cases, and we have seen, because of the seriousness of the cases and the number, the cost of that rise really significantly, from 63,000 last year to almost 90,000 this year. So I just wanted to give committee a sense of that work. We obviously have work across a wide range of other functions, and if committee will allow me, I'll just say a few moments more about that. We have our own initiative investigation, which looks at systemic failings across public bodies. Committee, I hope, will be familiar with our PIP report and the changes to benefits around medical evidence. We also issued Forgotten, which was a report around communications for those in health waiting lists, and we did have a finding of systemic maladministration and found that they were very much in disarray. We've been working with the Department of Health and Health and Social Care Trust to implement the recommendations of that, and we'll report on that shortly. But we are pleased to see some improvements in that area, and we are pleased to see that many trusts have put in place a text system now to properly alert patients when they're on a waiting list, to give them an idea of their clinical priority and to let them know how they can get in touch. Sometimes when I undertake systemic investigations, in order to make best use of resources, we undertake an overview report rather than a full investigation. So we also produced a report called Strengthening Our Roots, which was about tree protection orders in the planning system, and we really focused there on the lack of enforcement and the fact that there'd only been one enforcement across 369 breaches of tree protection orders. So we try to work in a systemic way to make broader improvements as well as those individual ones. We've also 3 reports due to come out shortly on access to healthcare. These focus on charging for healthcare, patient removal from GP services, which we have seen as an increasing issue, and the use of translation services across GPs. And we now have in plan a new own initiative which we will announce in the coming weeks. We try to take the key themes and learning from our work and from our investigations and share them with the public body and with the general public. So we produced 2 case digests that do that, one on schools and one on care homes. And we've 2 more in the pipeline, which are patient safety focused. So they focus on sepsis and they focus on women's health. Committee will know that we have a complaint standards role about trying to improve that public bodies complaints handling. And we do try to balance our work between being that focus on investigating individual complaints and helping public bodies get it right first time at the point of service. Local government in Northern Ireland has already moved to the new, simpler, more straightforward two-stage complaint process, and we are currently working across the health family, so trusts, GPs, care homes, family practitioners, to get that two-stage process in place. And we will shortly publish a timetable to cover the next 3 years to move all public bodies to that new process, and so public bodies can see when that's happening. If you will, I'll just briefly touch on my local government ethical standards role. So our overarching approach on this role is to improve the understanding of the requirements of the local government code of conduct. And we have engaged a lot with local councillors and with council staff around the code of conduct. We did a number of really significant surveys, and we continued with that work this year. This year we've engaged with over 38% of councillors, so over 160 councillors in all council areas, and we've delivered 10 direct training sessions, and we're also just about to launch a range of interactive training resources. So the focus is on helping councillors really understand their responsibility so that they don't inadvertently take action which causes them to breach the code of conduct. And we've also worked very hard, and I know we've written to committee about this, to ensure that those investigations are more timely. We always phone the councillor now directly when we get an allegation, and we encourage the councillors to engage in the process. I am pleased to say that there is no case at investigation under the Local Government Code of Conduct that is any older than 12 months now, and the majority of cases are a lot less than that. So the team have worked really hard to improve that. And just finally, committee will have seen our budget, and I know you will have questions, and we're happy to answer detailed questions on that. We have asked for an increase in our budget, and that is linked to the volume and the complexity of the work that we are seeing, which is putting our staff under significant pressure. As you are aware, because you provided me with funding to undertake a pay and grading review, we have faced significant staff turnover. Our staff engagement score is over 80%. So staff are primarily leaving for reasons of pay, and staff can come to us and spend 2 years in the office getting an excellent experience and skill set and move on for significantly more pay, and that's very difficult if actually you've someone who's a serious health complaint and their investigating officer moves. So we have looked at that pay and grading review, we have given committee information on it, and we've chosen option 2 on that because I think for the sustainability of the office and the effectiveness of the office, it's really important that we address that, and we're happy to answer questions on that. We've also put in a number of additional investigation posts to try to deal with the volume, but we have frozen a number of posts to try and ensure that we're making a balanced contribution to that. We're happy to answer those detailed questions on budget or indeed any other questions committee have, and thank you for allowing me the time to do that.
Thank you, Margaret, and the committee appreciates you sharing with us a flavour of some of the work that you do, and it highlights, I think, the harrowing nature of some of the investigations that your staff have to undertake. I'm sure it must be difficult for them at times to deal with some of the cases, so appreciate you sharing that with us. I have just a couple of questions. I know in conversations with you previously that staff retention is a huge challenge to you, and it is increasing concern within your office. So as well as the pay and grading exercise, what other steps have you taken to try and retain key skills within your office?
So I think we've done a number of things. We've looked at pay and grading. We have an excellent staff engagement score, so we engage very heavily with our staff. We have a new learning and development plan, so we look at what's your opportunities for training, is there internal opportunities to step up and to take on some additional duties and gain additional experience. But we are a small staff team, so we're just over 60 people, and in the end of the day there is only so many opportunities for progression within such a small staff team. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that.
So one of the other things that obviously we had discussed with the committee previously was some sort of a trainee programme, and we've set up a team to start to develop that. But I think when we looked at it, we're going to broaden that out as well to hopefully develop some sort of professionalisation of qualification for our existing staff as well. So while we're developing a trainee investigator programme, so that we're not always going to the market to recruit, that we're bringing in people, giving them skills and hopefully retaining them for a longer period of time. We are also looking at how we have a programme that helps our staff who are with us attain all their qualifications and experience, so they're much more involved in the office. I think it's a difficult balance between the pressure at the front end and the amount of time you devote to training and development. And as Margaret has alluded to, staff get really good experience with us, and when they leave us, they are going on to very good roles in other organisations, primarily in the public sector, and they will take the experience that they've got with us and use it for good. And I think the size of the office means that I think holding people for as long as we can, I think, is the imperative. I think we're aware that we won't keep them all the time. People will come in, they will contribute to the office and its development and the work it does, and they will move on. And I suppose in the time that I've been with the office, we have more earlier career people now than we would have had in the past. And they say they're very good, very capable, and they develop very well when they're with us. We have a fantastic induction programme. We've just recruited a new set of investigators, and we have a really good induction programme to both introduce them to the office and what we do and why we do it, but also then in helping them with their skills development as they move through and the longer they're with us. So I think we're very mindful of that need. You know, salary is clearly an issue. It's coming through in our staff exit interviews, but it's not just that. It's the whole package. I mean, we meet with our staff as a whole team every 2 months as a senior leadership team to give them the opportunity to ask us questions, to tell them about what we're doing. We tell them after each senior management team meeting what it is we've discussed and where we're taking the organisation. So we do our best in all of that, but despite those efforts, you will see our staff turnover in an appendix in the paper. We do have an issue.
Yeah, well, while acknowledging it is very challenging work that your staff do, but I'm sure there must be a level of job satisfaction as well when they conclude an investigation and get some closure for members of the public. So before I open it up to the rest of the committee, just one more question. What difference would the proposed increased budget submission you have outlined today have on the service that you can provide to the public?
I think it could have a number of impacts. I think we do need more staff to deal with the volume of complaints, and our staff actually, I think for the first time, are starting to really say, like, the volume of complaints is not manageable within our current KPI and our current performance. So we would have to create a queue. We would have to say to people, you know, before we can even allocate your case, you're going to have to join a queue. And one of the difficulties with that is people will often have been in a complaints process for maybe 2 or 3 years anyway before they come to us. So you're then saying to them, well, actually, before we can even consider that, you're going to have to wait in a queue. And I do think that's difficult given the nature and the seriousness, because I think our staff are at capacity. So I definitely need more staff if I'm going to continue to deliver that service. And I think to deliver that service effectively, I really need to address the pay and grading. Like Sean says, people come to us, they get an excellent experience. People tell us that as they go. People often don't want to go, and people often tell us that they don't want to go. You know, but people need to move. We all have mortgages and families for that reason, and I would also hope that we would be able to retain those really good staff we have for longer.
Thanks, Margaret, for that. Okay, my Vice Chair of the committee, Diane, has a question.
Chair. Thanks very much, Margaret and team, for being here. I think that the work that you do is just so important, and you talk about the volume and severity of cases. I think it is just speaks to the underfunding of our public services here, and when people are facing this, I think that having access to your service is so important. And Margaret, yourself, to be commended on actually individually overseeing each of those reports coming through, just to give people that feeling of importance and satisfaction that the actual ombudsman is looking at their case when they feel so strongly. But I just think that you're talking about the increase in the complexity of cases and increase in severity of harm and ultimately preventable deaths. It's really, really serious and shocking stuff and such important work. And I think that whenever your office is dealing with that, there is potential to do so much more in terms of you have the individual cases that you're dealing with, but also looking at the entire complaints procedures and the likes of the health trust and other public services you talk about with those, and with housing, they have to have exhausted that first before they come to you. Would that be something that you would say would be like a piece of work that you could take forward to make recommendations? Because ultimately, if you're having so many significant cases coming through on this, if their complaints process was better, could that help the volume of your work?
I think that could help the volume of our work. I think there will always be a proportion that will come through to the Ombudsman's office. And I think if you look at our legislation, we are an alternative access to justice. So we are an alternative to the court. So I think there are two things that potentially would happen. One is I think there are cases that may otherwise go on medical negligence route, and that people choose not to go to that route, and that is actually a saving to the public purse. And what people want is a change. So I think people come to us and say, actually, I know I could go this route, but I'm not interested in that. What I want to see is some change. And we have, through complaint standards, been working. So we've worked extensively with local government to put in place that new procedure. We're currently working with health. That is a big culture change, because there are big cultural issues about openness and candour and a willingness to admit mistakes. And in our experience, when public bodies actually put their hands up and say to people early on, actually we've got this wrong, there is usually a degree of trust and openness. But when that doesn't happen, and when you get further and further into that complaints process and people lose trust in a public body, it's really, really difficult to get that back. So we're currently working with trusts, care homes and GPs to try and improve how they're doing their complaints handling. And then we will be doing the other public bodies, but that is also a mammoth task, and that we can do, there's a certain amount that we will do with that, and we'll put in place that 2-stage procedure, but it also requires those other bodies to do it. So that is a work in progress, but it's a big system change, and that takes some time.
Absolutely, and staff as well, and the expertise. With the things like the domestic homicide reviews and the safeguarding panels coming through, would you be working alongside those reviews as they happen, or does that happen completely
It tends to happen separately, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think most of those, our policy and engagement team obviously keep an eye on those things, and if we have people who have come to us to raise concerns and we have learned something from looking at those, we share them to inform those, obviously, because of the independent nature of our role. We watch what's going on, we see where we have information that's useful to them, and we'll share it and respond to consultations or input into it. We've done work around restraint and seclusion in schools, and we obviously produced a digest, and we shared that with the Education Committee here, who are taking forward work around that, and the department are obviously working on new guidelines. So that's kind of how we do it. We watch what is going on, and then we look at our information to see if we have gleaned anything that is useful to help that in terms of further and better development of policy or to address concerns. Those are not areas that we get large volumes of concerns about, which is an interesting point, because they are very significant and serious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just in terms of the pay and grading review that you've completed, obviously this work is very, very specialised, and you're saying like people who are moving on from you, that's the common theme in the interview. And again, to be commended that you're taking the time to go through the exit interview process, and that is what you're genuinely getting back, that people would love to stay, but they're moving on for opportunities where they're taking on bigger investigations and more complex things. It's a shame to be losing people in that way with that level of expertise, and as you say, your workload's increasing, you have the evidence base that it is increasing, and I don't see any reason why we would expect it to suddenly drop there. Do you think that this budget proposal would have quite a quick impact on staff turnover, and we'll be able to see a difference within the first year or two?
I want to make myself a hostage to fortune, but I know that we've lost people to some of the other regulators because they've been able to go, especially in that cost of living crisis, and get more money. So I am hoping that it will mean that we'll be able to keep some of those really good people. And even though not all the posts will go up, because we've done this, so civil service pay grades have a very, very short scale. So you can be with us 2 years and that's it, you're at the top of that and there's nowhere else to go. So I'm hoping that it actually will have a fairly immediate impact, and it mean we don't lose people purely because of that, and we will keep them with us for longer.
I think one of the things we noticed is particularly in that cost of living crisis, was that very short scale. People at the top of the scale, and certainly there was 1 year in the civil service where nobody got a pay rise. So people are at the top of the scale, 0% pay rise. They really felt it. So people who wouldn't naturally necessarily be looking for another role started to look. I think one of the things we're proposing in our pay and grade and remove is moving from the civil service scales to the NJC scales, because they're continuous. Whereas there's big gaps between the civil service scales, which mean the impact of moving grades is very significant, and the impact of that in terms of budget decisions is in an appendix in the paper. So to say what we're currently looking at the minute is and when we look at the costs of this, is to try to be pragmatic about it, to extend the scales to allow for progression for people to stay with us longer. So I think rationally, you would hope that if we extend those scales, that would have an impact for us in people staying with us longer. If we don't have any internal promotion opportunities, at least they'll stay with us while they progress along the scale.
A lot of thought to all of these things in terms of the staff. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, John, you were the next to indicate.
The first one I think has answered itself, so I'll combine two questions together here. I think the first one we dealt with very quickly. I take it there are no regulatory or formal barriers to departure from the civil service pay grade structures. The explanations have kind of made that clear. Just something that came into my head earlier in the presentation. The second one is, and I hope you understand, because I want to add to the tributes that have been paid to the work that you do, and I know the value that it brings to people, because through our constituency services we sometimes see where things end up, and we know that people get the outcome they need and deserve. But in the current economic and budgetary climate for government departments and public bodies, I know that you'll understand an annual increase far in excess of the rate of inflation is something that there may be perceptions about, and there most certainly will be questions about. So can I ask, what other than the pay increases are contributing to that? Because the pay increase is clearly only a smaller proportion of that. And then secondly, are other running cost expenses being examined on a regular basis, cost of properties, paying bills, any other contracted services, those types of things that will secure as many savings as possible on a year-on-year basis?
So absolutely, I understand why you'd asked me that, and absolutely I understand the pressure on public services, and I think it's absolutely fair. In terms of the legislation, we need to have due regard to civil service terms and conditions, which would be a similar position to the Audit Office, and I think quite some years ago the Audit Office moved from the civil service pay and grading, and we did look at, if we try to resolve this and we stay on civil service, would that be workable? But in fact, the cost of that is prohibitive, to be honest. I mean, absolutely prohibitive.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do anything on it. So we have and do take a real look. So I think there's a number of things for me. Firstly, when public services are under pressure, I think there is a fair body of evidence that says that's not the point at which to reduce scrutiny. In fact, it's the point at which to increase scrutiny. And I also have to deal with what comes through my door. So, and the only other way for me to deal with what's coming through my door is actually to say to people, I'm really sorry, I can't, you're just going to have to wait. And that may be, maybe that's the outcome, and I will obviously come back to committee and explain how I would intend to put that in place But I know that we are stretched to the point in terms of staff capacity and what they're dealing with. I know that I have excellent goodwill from my staff, but I know I can't stretch that any further. So there's that issue for me. I'm actually going to hand over to Sean and then to Kirsty, because we have looked at where can we save, and there are some GAE costs I think that are adding to the costs in the budget, but I'm going to let them do the detail if that's okay.
So, I mean, in terms of being a public sector body, as you would expect, we try to reduce our costs to direct as much of the money that we're given through the vote to the front line. So over 2/3 of our staff are directly involved in managing complaints directly or involved in own initiative investigations. So the back house of the office is quite small. The corporate services team, which Kirsty runs, is a very small team. So we use HR Connect for our payroll. So we don't have payroll staff. We use IT Assist for provision of all our computer systems. We use CPD for our procurement. We use the shared contracts for building maintenance. So where there is shared procurement in the civil service or broad public service system, we join those collaborative arrangements. So our cleaning are through a collaborative arrangement as well. So we try to reduce those costs, but one of the issues that we have faced in our GAE is as we increase our number of staff, we increase the costs, so our IT costs go up through software licenses, hardware licenses, and so on. We have invested in a new finance system which we just introduced last week, and part of the rationale and reason for upgrading that was to allow us to really focus on cost and make sure that we can deliver value. I think we try to reduce our costs by sharing services. One of the proposals that we have made is to freeze non-frontline complaint handling staff that we had been given budget for in the past. That we've made the decision to say it's better if we direct resources to managing the increased volume of complaints, and we can manage for now without those in the current climate. So we've done that, look at all the roles within the office, what they do, what they contribute. And it's not that those roles aren't valuable, they are, but in the current climate, I think it is make that increased volume of complaints while being conscious of the pressure on resources generally. Kirsty, I don't know whether you want to add anything on those GAE costs.
The only other thing in terms of GAE that is increasing is the, Margaret referred to earlier, the professional advice that we get. So IPA costs are up 20% to over 100k this year too. So and that's just again the nature of the complaints coming through and the complexity, and us to need to assess those complaints fairly and accurately.
And we tend to get those independent professional advisors primarily from England, so they come through our colleague Ombudsman, Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman, but we get very senior clinicians for rates of like £50 an hour, because they use it as a learning opportunity as well for them to look at casework. So if we were to look to do that locally, we would pay hugely more than that. And it also means that you're getting people, we are a very small jurisdiction and people do tend to know each other, so you're also getting that very independent and outside view, and people who have a vast range of experience. It is just the increase in volume and seriousness that means and public bodies and individuals deserve that where we make findings that we have absolutely bottomed that out, and we've used the appropriate people to question that evidence and make sure that especially where we're making serious findings, that they're right.
Okay, look, thanks for that. You know the context of the question. And
absolutely. No, you're absolutely right to ask
something
it.
we all have to be cognizant of. Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Ciara, you've indicated.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just first and foremost, it is quite alarming to hear the increase over the last 3 years of the range of complaints across particularly health, education and housing, and likewise the complexity of those cases. So based on that, and then likewise just staff turnover. You have a small team, and 10% can be quite high when you have such a small team. So just in relation to being able to meet your targets, you had mentioned stage 3, approximately 52 weeks. And as you did mention, people have probably exhausted the complaints processes within the other departments, and then they come to you. Is there a knock-on impact currently on maybe targets that you would set in relation to particularly stage 3 of a complaints process? Thank you.
So when I took up post 4 years ago, stage 3 on our KPI performance was something that we were struggling to do. And we did have a significant group of older cases, and the team worked really, really hard, and we cleared them, and we've hit our stage 3. But in the current year, so we monitor where we are on those KPIs every month at senior management team. So in the current year, that stage 3 is under pressure. And it couldn't be otherwise if I told you it wasn't. So we are working really hard to get those out. And as we get more in this year, you've 52 weeks to complete those. So it means that even into next year, the more cases we get now, the more pressure on our stage 3 next year. So that's why we've come to do it. At this point, there was a point slightly earlier in the year where we thought we weren't going to make our stage 3 in the current year. We are hoping that we have worked hard enough and done enough now, but that is the one that's under pressure. And I'm trying to remember, I think we'd 4 reports to issue every week between now and Christmas to make that KPI. So we're talking really significant pressure for the team. So it is under pressure. We're working really hard to try and keep it, that KPI at 70%, but that's what happens. And an outcome of this, it would be part of why I would want to create a clear queue. So rather than just letting that build to where we weren't meeting that and people were thinking, what's happening with the Ombudsman's office, I'd prefer, if we need to manage this, to create a clear queue and actually say to people, we haven't allocated your case yet, so you haven't even started that 52 weeks. But there is real pressure, Ciara, and I my teams do work really hard, and they really care about the work that they do, and they know it's important work. But, there's also only so much you can ask of people, and staff well-being and health also has to be a consideration.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And then just secondly, I very much welcome, obviously, the work that you are doing, particularly around the health sector, and supporting them in their 2-stage complaints process. And then you did note in your report that you'll be looking to assist all other government departments with maybe potentially a deadline of 2027. It would be useful, is there any key challenges, particularly now within the health sector, that you have that experience in doing that work? Has there been any key challenges that you have found, or any barriers to progress in that work?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the issues with health and social care is it's a huge and complicated system. There's been a lot of confusion in the past around the roles of various organisations. So the confusion between complaints, SAIs, safeguarding issues, regulatory issues, which are for RQIA. So when we did some work previously to help inform how we would take this forward, that was one of the key issues. So we have had a commitment from those senior people in the health and social care system. I think they understand that the complaint system currently isn't delivering for them, and it's certainly not delivering for those people who raise complaints. And I think there is a willingness to try and address that. Now, to address it, I think the big issue is culture. So Margaret alluded to, so we can change the process to a 2-stage process, 5 and 20 days, but that requires those organisations to be really open and honest when things have gone wrong. And I think the more work we can do to encourage culture change around openness and how we deal with those scenarios when organisations admit that things have gone wrong and it has caused harm. So I think we need to have a very mature conversation around that change in culture and what it looks like and how we address when things have gone wrong. Ideally, things don't go wrong, but the reality is mistakes are made in health and social care. I think in particular, when mistakes are made, they have really serious consequences, and we've had a number of inquiries and they have alluded to, and our own investigations alluded to where that is. So what we intend to do to support that change is obviously the process, but also we're going to provide training resources and materials and best practice guides. So part of the approach that we have taken is to support the change, to make sure that those people in the front end of the health service are actually equipped to be able to empathise with people who have had a trauma and a really bad experience, try to work with them to give them those clear, honest answers, And as Margaret has alluded to, our experience of the vast majority of people is if you're really open and honest with them and you build their trust, they accept that explanation when things have gone wrong. It's where they're faced with barriers, a lack of openness, they don't get the answers that they come to us. That is a very costly process. Investigation is a costly thing. I mean, in terms of our staff team, there's twice as many investigators, more than twice as many investigators at stage 3 than there are at stage 2. And that just reflects the level and detail that's required. If public bodies were much more open with people, more of those complaints would be resolved by them. One of the key issues we're pushing for under complaint standards is data. Health and social care, to be fair, is probably better than a lot of sectors in that they gather and publish data, whereas we want more transparency around all public services putting their data on complaints and their analysis of that data and what it tells them and what they're going to do to address those recurring themes in complaints. So I think the whole approach we're hoping will actually drive improvement, but that culture change, that culture of openness that we all desire, the Assembly desires, that we desire as a Public Services Ombudsman, is really, really important.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and I think you're right. It is critically important that the resources are put in across all the departments, and they have those mechanisms and having a proactive process. Like most, they just want an open and honest opinion to that. That's just finally, just in relation to, do you think there is enough resources across the government departments, particularly say health, now that you have worked intensively there, in dealing, having the qualified experienced staff to deal with complaints process?
I think there's a number of issues around that, Ciara. One is, so there's the complaint handling staff who tend not to be clinical. So, they're staff who receive the complaints, make sure they get to the right team. One of the issues that we face in many complaint investigations is a lack of independence. So as you can imagine, it goes back to the team that originally provided the care, and they need to be involved and they need to answer to the issues that have been raised. But what we have found really useful is where some of our health and social care bodies bring someone who sits outside of, they're within their own organisation, but they sit outside of the team who delivered the care to critically analyse the information that's there. We find that's more likely to bring about an early acknowledgement where things are not as they should have been and where things may have gone wrong. So I think the people who deliver always need to be involved in the complaints process because they know what happened. You need to speak to them, you need to understand what it went, but there is a need for independence in that process, and sometimes a need to take things outside of your organisation, for someone else to look at them given the nature of the issues that have been raised. So I think the Trust could do with some resources for those much more serious issues to be able to use, whether it be Royal College reviews or just an independent voice to help them look at the issues that have been raised, particularly where they've caused harm, or it may be a more systemic issue that could affect other individuals as well. So I think at the front end, to be able to receive complaints, all those organisations need to have enough staff. But I think my view on it is it's about the training of those staff and their understanding, particularly in relation to empathising with people and the experience they've had and helping to support them through the complaints process. I think our experience is the complaints process itself is re-traumatising people, and that is not helpful. So I think we need to look at that in that wider context of how we support it. The whole process has taken much too long. I mean, currently to get through the complaints process as public bodies is an exhausting process, and then I say if you don't get a resolution, you have another process with the Public Services Ombudsman, which is why your point about probably resourced and trained staff in those organisations is actually crucial to delivering the improvement we're looking for.
And I think, Ciara, that applies not just on health. So there are some public bodies where we are seeing an increase in complaints, but we actually know that part of what is driving that is really, really poor complaint handling. So this year, Sean and I met with all the chief executives of each of the trust and reflected back to them from our data what we are seeing about their complaints handling and did a little bit of comparison about how good they were. But there are other public sector bodies, and we are seeing a real increase in complaints because their complaint handling is really poor. Our first response to that will be to go to bring the issue to their attention. My team have gone and offered some support, but we then get to the point where we're saying that actually this isn't okay. This is not dealing with your complaints properly is a governance issue, because not dealing with your complaints properly is a failure to really understand where the public service that you are tasked with delivering is not working right. So your complaints service and your complaints data are actually a really key part of informing you how well things are going, where your big areas of risk are, and what your governance is like. So, and that is a work in progress. I mean, I understand there's loads of pressure on public services and they mightn't always see complaints as up there, but I think particularly from the Chief Executives of Trust, we have seen real engagement around an understanding that complaints are a really key metric for them. And if you look at our public inquiries in Northern Ireland, the very vast majority of them, there were already serious and significant complaints in the system. And there's a huge cost if you're then not addressing those and you end up with a level of harm where you're in a public inquiry. So there is a cost issue to it as well.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ciara, for that. Thank you very much on behalf of the committee. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning, and we'd wish to place on record our appreciation of the challenging and valuable work that you carry out on behalf of the public, and we wish you well going forward. Thank you.
We much appreciate the committee's time. Thank you.
Thank you, members, for that. Just to advise members that a discussion on the budget submissions from the NIAO and the NIPSO will take place in closed session following the next two agenda items. So agenda item 8 is correspondence. I'd refer members to the correspondence table at page 33 of the table pack and page 172 of the main pack, which contains several items for consideration. So just to ask members if you're content to note the correspondence. Content? Okay. So we'll move to the next item of business, which is any other business. So do members have any other items of business that they wish to raise at this point?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So now I need to seek agreement from the committee to move into closed session.
Committee Room 21. Sound.